Hi everyone, this is Paul here for the Magdalene Centre. Today I'm doing the astrology report for the week commencing the 26th of June. I'm outlining some of the key aspects and transits taking place this week and giving an overview of what it all means. Before I do that, I just want to clarify, as I always do, that the astrology doesn't control our lives. It gives us a framework to help us understand what is unfolding around us. It helps us to recognise where the opportunities for growth are and the kind of lessons for us to be learning at this time. But for anything to actually change or transform requires our participation, i.e. taking action and seeking to utilise astrology rather than it just being empty knowledge. But it's also important that our actions are guided by wisdom and not just ego impulse, so that the choices that we make don't end up creating unnecessary karma for ourselves down the line. Now, in terms of the astrology this week, I'll begin with the moon as usual. She starts in Aries, so this is a time where we may feel that drive to take action, to make things happen, and to kind of assert ourselves, if you like. On Thursday, she'll be entering Taurus, so this is a time where we may feel that desire to kind of slow down, to maybe connect with nature and be more present in the body. And it's just kind of that time to nurture the self, if you like, and take things slowly. On Saturday, she'll be entering Gemini, so it's a time where we may feel an emotional need to connect with people, to work on communication, and it's also a time where we may feel a desire to seek more information about whatever our most pressing queries are at the time. And then on Tuesday, in the early hours, the moon will enter her home sign of Cancer. So this is a time where we feel that desire to spend more time at home. It's also a good time for kind of nurturing, for getting in touch with the emotions and allowing them to flow without being drawn into them. And on Tuesday itself, we'll have the solar eclipse in Cancer. So I'll come back to this because it's arguably the most powerful event of the week, but it's worth mentioning it now. But most of the astrology starts from about Thursday onwards, so we'll be starting to feel the effect of the eclipse window, because we start to feel the energy build up towards it at least a week and so in advance. So we'll start to feel the effects building up towards that Cancer eclipse on Tuesday. But before that, we have Mercury changing signs. So this is on Thursday, and Thursday is the main day for astrology this week. So with Mercury moving from Cancer to Leo, this is a time where the focus of the rational mind, if you like, moves from a mental understanding of the emotions and the subconscious mind to a focus on mental creativity, and it's about allowing developing a greater mental understanding of the creative process, with the ultimate aim of seeking to recognise that the creative energies that we channel when we're creating anything new isn't actually our own energy, it's something that flows through us. So it's recognising that we're a channel for creative energy, but we don't own that creative energy that flows through us. And the more we recognise ourselves as an instrument of this creativity, the more readily that kind of creative energy flows. But this is Mercury in the shadow period, so bear in mind that Mercury will only be in Leo briefly before backtracking to Cancer later in July. So this will give us a flavour of some of the areas that will be covered during Mercury retrograde, and there'll be a separate video of that closer to the time. But it's worth being aware of what will come up, and the more aware we are of what's going on inside ourselves at this time, and especially in terms of the rational mind and our thinking processes, the easier it will be to kind of adjust to Mercury retrograde when that starts on the 7th of July. Also on Thursday, we'll have the Sun will be sextile to Uranus and square to Chiron. So with the sextile to Uranus, this aspect gives us an opportunity to seek to transform our sense of self through receiving information or receiving insight from the higher mind. But for this to happen, it requires that we be open to the possibility of change in the first place. If we're resistant to change, then we're more likely to experience Uranus in its negative form, which is all about chaos. The point of the chaos, though, being to try and wake us up from our attachments, wake us up from the limited perceptions of who we are, and trying to awaken us to the greater levels of our being. So with this aspect, it's about trying to awaken to the fact that who we are as a conscious individual is more than just the concepts that we hold in our minds. It's more than just the emotional underpinnings. It's more than our thinking. It's more than our creative abilities or the resources that we have. Our sense of identity is not bound by any of these things. They're all part of the human experience, so it's important that we do maintain a connection with it so that we can feel those elements of ourselves. But ultimately, we're far more than we realise, and that kind of realisation can only come about through learning to be in the present moment, and it's in the present moment all change takes place anyway. We don't live in the past or future, it's just our minds convincing us that we can control either one. But ultimately, it's about trying to waking us up to the deeper levels of who we are, and to transform our values side of things, and transform our sense of self-esteem through separating our self-esteem from what we have and basing it on who we are, not the possessions that we have. As I mentioned, the Sun will also be square to Chiron in Aries, so this aspect highlights where there's a wound to our willingness to shine our own light, or to be visible, if you like. So with Chiron in Aries, it's the wound to the I am. So with the Sun aspecting Chiron at this time, it's potentially shedding a light on, or helping us to become more aware of, where we're using limiting self-talk. Where do we tend to use very negative kind of terms or fear-based terms in terms of how we describe ourselves? Are we always saying that I'm scared, or I'm not good enough, or I'm stupid, or anything like this? Or are we saying that I'm courageous, or I am who I am, or I am that I am? Are we moving beyond mental labels, or are we moving beyond the limiting aspects of I am statements? Because whatever we say after the words I am ultimately defines our sense of who we are, because I am is an identity statement, it's an affirmation. And if we're using negative talk after that, then we're severely diminishing our capacity to radiate our true self outwards. So this is an aspect which reminds us to be more conscious of the words we're saying after the words I am, and it's also recognising that when it comes to shining our own light, we're not shining it just for the sake of saying look at me, look how good I am. Shining our light is also adding to the collective light of consciousness. It's moving beyond shining purely to gain attention. It's more about shining for the benefit of other people. It's that radiating that warmth and beneficent spirit towards other people, and to radiate that energy for the good of the whole and not just for our own benefit. And the last aspect on Thursday is going to be Venus in conjunct Pluto. So this aspect highlights, or potentially brings to our awareness, where we need to be mindful of the kind of values that we live by and the nature of our relationships, and recognise where we need to transform them. Where are we still basing our value system on what we've been conditioned by, as opposed to the values that we were born with before we were conditioned to adopt the materialistic values that society wants us to adopt. And it's also about the nature of our relationships. Do we base them on authenticity and mutual empowerment, or are we basing it on a need to try and reaffirm the ego? So Pluto, at the end of the day, is all about that uncompromising truth. It's the truth that is often uncomfortable, but if we embrace it, we will inevitably empower ourselves and become much freer in the process. And it's also recognising that for a relationship to be truly long lasting of any kind, whether it's romantic, friendship, business, it requires there be a degree of honesty and integrity with one another and authenticity. If we're not prepared to embrace these kind of qualities in relationships, then inevitably relationships will devolve into power plays and control dramas. So it's important that we don't allow the ego to undermine relationships, and a need for instant gratification or a fear of commitment to undermine the important relationships in our lives. The next day the Sun will be trine to Lilith. This aspect is it's ultimately about shining, not just for our own sake, but for helping other people. So to some extent it mirrors the aspect between the Sun and Chiron. But the thing is, it's about being our own self, or to thine own self be true, and encouraging other people to do the same, to be true to who they are, not just do stuff in order to gain social acceptance or anything like that, and to not just be someone who copies other people because they don't actually have a clue what their own creative skills are, what their own creative expressions are. So Sun in Lilith highlights the need to shine our own light and encourage one another to do the same, but doing it in a way that honours the core truth of who the person is, and not just copying other people's effort in order to look better than we are. The next aspect, also involved in the Sun, will be on Sunday. This is a sextile between the Sun and Vesta. So Vesta's in Taurus at the moment, in a loose conjunction with Uranus, and this aspect is about commitment to the self, if you like. It's commitment to being who we are and committing to whatever values that truly matter to us, and to make sure that whatever we're committing our energies to in terms of manifesting a stable bedrock for ourselves is done in a way that honours who we are, and isn't just done to try and gain other people's approval, as it were, or to try and satisfy other people's needs at the expense of ourselves. Vesta's core focus is about staying true to ourselves. It's about that personal integrity and the capacity to honour oneself whilst maintaining, or whilst fulfilling the roles that we play, or the acts of service required to help people out when they're in need. Now, the next aspects are all on Tuesday. So the first one is going to be that Mars will be entering Leo. So Mars is moving out of Cancer, where it's been all about kind of that emotional strength, or the emotional desires. With Mars in Leo, this may feel like a lighting, if you were, because Mars is no longer symbolically drowned by the water of Cancer. But in Leo, it's about creativity. It's about desire to express ourselves authentically. But one of the things we do need to look to be mindful of is where we doing it out of a subconscious need for other people's approval or to be recognised. It's learning to value our own authentic self-expression without worrying about whether other people truly value it or anything like that, because ultimately, when we're true to ourselves, there will inevitably be people who, for whatever reason, it just rubs them the wrong way, and trying to do things or seeking kind of glamour, or seeking any kind of affirmation from other people to affirm ourselves isn't very healthy for ourselves. Ideally, it's more about desiring to be a vessel for that divine creative force, that creative energy that animates everything and should ideally be channeled through our actions. So it's learning to separate this divine creative force from a need for approval. It's learning to recognise that by being true to who we are and being authentic in our expression, that divine creative force can flow through us and out into the world through our actions, and it will automatically be manifested in very kind of generosity of spirit, kind of benevolence and mercy towards other people, and just a seeking of radiating our own joy and sharing the joy that we have in our own lives with other people. So it's that mutual sharing of joy, of that emotional warmth, of that connection to one another, and a desire to be true to who we are, to rather than, because Mars is generally about doing, but Leo is about being. So it's about bringing the actions into alignment with our core of who we are, and allow our actions to be guided by our core essence, rather than just mental thoughts or any kind of desires, if you like, born out of the ego, which is all based on past conditioning. It's about being physically present in the here and now, and seeking to radiate emotional warmth, joy and creativity towards other people. So it's that radiating that light out into the world through our actions. And as I mentioned earlier, we have a solar eclipse on Tuesday, so this opens the eclipse window. With a solar eclipse, the moon, which kind of deals with the subconscious mind, symbolically blocks out the conscious mind. So the subconscious mind becomes very potent at this time, and during the eclipse season or eclipse window, this is the time to be shedding old subconscious attachments, shedding old subconscious needs, if you like, or any subconscious conditioning, and to learn to be present in our lives, and to learn to pursue the path that is right for who we are, to allow anything in our lives that doesn't belong anymore to be let go of, to make space for new beginnings. With the solar eclipse being in Cancer, the main focus here is all about the emotions. So with it being, this is a North Node eclipse because the North Node is in Cancer, so this particular solar eclipse is about seeking to embody the higher elements of Cancer. So things like being connected with our own feelings without being swamped by them. It's about having that empathy and humility with the people. It's about having that solid foundation for our own lives, so seeking to create the foundation required to support the life that we want to make for ourselves, rather than supporting the life that will bring us social acclaim but won't make us feel particularly fulfilled in life. So it's about getting back in touch with who we are, getting in touch with our core feelings and emotions, but without being swamped by them. So one of the most important things during this time is to remember perspective. It's learning to witness the emotions rather than being swamped by them, and it's learning to not take other people's emotional stuff personally. It's recognizing that the emotions are very subjective, and to some extent they allow us to develop those kind of human connections with one another, and part of it is about honouring one another. But at the same time, emotions are often triggered by our own thoughts, and if our thinking is negative, then emotional energy can come bursting up, and we end up thinking ourselves into a funk, as it were. Another area that we need to be very mindful of is if we have a habit of engaging in self-pity. Again, this is not remotely helpful for ourselves. It doesn't actually solve anything. It just adds more energy to reinforce the notion that there's a problem in the first place. It's learning to take a step back, to be present with the situation, to allow the emotional energy to rise and fall naturally. So in effect, it's seeking to, if the emotions were a river, is either be standing on the bank or imagine there's a bridge over the river. If we're standing on the bridge, we can observe the river flowing beneath us, but we're not getting wet in it. We're not being drawn into its depths or into its subtle undercurrents. It's about being present with it and just allowing the emotions to flow uninhibited, but obviously contained by the banks. So it's about being present with the emotions so they don't pull us off centre. And it's about being empathetic with other people and radiating that kind of nurturing spirit. But it does not mean that we try and get involved in other people's drama, that we try to fix other people. It's about radiating that nurturing energy so that it creates a kind of environment that allows people to get in touch with their own feelings and allow them to bring themselves back into alignment. So one thing we do need to be very mindful of is that we don't suppress emotions. It's allowing them to be felt, or allowing them to be understood without being drawn into them, or without trying to bury them or run from them. It's allowing them to flow without any, allow them to flow uninhibited, but not be pulled into the water. So it is possible to stand on the bank of the river and watch the water go by without jumping in it whenever we see objects flowing down the river. Whatever emotional dross comes up during this particular window, it's an opportunity for us to clear out the past, to learn to not take things so personally, and it's learn to overcome any self-pity tendencies and instead nurture ourselves through getting in touch with our core feelings, getting in touch with our psychic senses, if you like, or the intuitive side and the subconscious mind. And it's nurturing ourselves through releasing old habits, it's releasing old attachments that may bring a false sense of security but do not allow us to move into the next phase of life that would bring us true fulfillment. So it's about letting go of attachments, it's letting go of taking things personally, it's letting go of self-pity, and it's embodying that nurturing spirit through not taking anything personally. It's allowing that energy to flow through us and radiate from our very being, because when it's radiating from us, it can touch other people's spirits, and if they need the help and they're willing to accept it, then by all means we can offer nurturing at that point. But the more we allow the quality of our energy to do the nurturing rather than seeking to directly intervene in other people's lives, the more effective nurturing we can provide other people, because it's no longer about trying to get someone to be the way we think they should be in order to empower themselves. It's instead radiating that unconditional love and that nurturing spirit and allowing the person to make their own choices based on facilitating them getting back in touch with their own emotions. But again, it's important to remember that we all have free will, so it's very important we don't try to meddle in other people's lives or respect other people's choices rather than trying to take control. So this week there's quite a lot going on involving the sun, so the core sense of self is being highlighted this week. But with us being in the eclipse window and also in the shadow of Mercury retrograde, it's very important, or more important than ever, that we become present in our lives, that we slow right down and seek to match the universal flow rather than trying to fight to make things happen or trying to force things to happen outside of natural timing. The more we slow down and be present in our lives, the more easily the kind of lessons that the astrology is highlighting can be assimilated, because when we are in the present moment and in touch with our own intuition, our intuition will naturally be aligned with the kind of energies going on around us, and we'll often find that we subconsciously start making the changes required in order to maximise our learning and maximise our growth. So the most important takeaway this week is to slow right down, be present, and let go of any old conditioning or any old attachments that keeps us stuck in situations that are unfulfilling, and instead learn to embrace the present moment and to live in the present moment in how we interact with other people, and to not stop taking things personally when people do things which could potentially be emotionally hurtful. But if we're not attached to the emotions and we're just observing them, emotions can flow by and the ego can't then use it to try and keep us playing small, if you like. So may the coming week bring you many blessings and many new insights for your life and opportunities for growth. Take care and be blessed.